Well, the Labour Party dominates this podcast, which might be a bit of a shock for followers of independence, but not in a very good way for Keir Starmer. Obviously, there's been a bit of a collapse in confidence since Angela Rayner, the golden girl of the working class side of Labour, stepped out because of messing up completely her stamp duty on the purchase of what actually is a third residence. So we take a look at the race for the deputy leadership. We talk also about poor old Ian Murray, who sacrificed life principles actually over nuclear weapons to be loyal to Keir Starmer, only to be sacked on the phone. Have a wee look at Douglas Alexander and how liked he is north of the border by his own folk. And flags. Who could miss this? I mean, the use of the Saltire here, but more especially the need to keep mentioning the Union Jack in every press conference by every member of the British Cabinet. How will that really pan out for the left? Those are the headlines. Now for the podcast.
Well, hi chums, and welcome to this week's Leslie Riddoch podcast. It's been another cracking week for the UK government. How are things with you, Leslie? Are you awake yet to quote Andrea Jenkin in her bizarre Reform UK conference sing-along?
Gosh, you see there, I missed that.
You're a lucky thing.
Yeah. Well, there was a death in the family, which took a lot of time and was pretty horrible, and made me check actually on the progress of Liam MacArthur's assisted dying bill. I think anyone who's been through anything like this recently is just, well, you know, it's a horrible thing to watch. So it is apparently sitting waiting to come back in September for, I think, is it stage 2? But, you know, this is kind of still on the go. So, I think I'll be trying to find out more about it, actually. But anyway, so that, not to take too much time of it, but it was utterly horrible. Then, in the midst of it all, I went to Kirkcudbright to do a thing at the Kirkcudbright Fringe, which Jerry Hassan organises. It was a debate with Henry McLeish, which was quite frisky and entertaining. I would have to say I think the audience was about 98% yes, which was a bit of a surprise to everybody but me. So that was fine. A lot of driving. By God, that is a long way away, Kirkcudbright. And en route, again, weirdly, was staying with a friend in Ayr, so ended up going with her to the Ayr show. Right, you know, this is just, anybody who's listening in the west of Scotland will go, well, obviously, the Ayr show. Who knew? I mean, if you live on the other coast completely, it's the Red Arrows, which would not be my preferred sort of thing to watch. Lots of military hardware, you know, the RAF out in force and so on. Until, and I mean, bear in mind, I was already in a bit of a weepy state, but basically a Hurricane and a Spitfire came in a sort of fly past. And I mean, my dad was a pilot in the Second World War and flew both those aircraft. So I was just in tears watching that. And I'm sure everybody else would just, you know, why? What was this woman saying publicly, you know? But it was also something of the contrast with all the speed and deftness and unbelievable sort of flippiness and pyrotechnics of the modern aircraft. And then these old, slow, you know, huge thundering aircraft coming in. And you think again about the people who were in them with essentially a piece of plywood between them and eternity. So anyway, it was a heck of a weekend in which I saw nothing of the Reform Conference. So over to you on that, Maha.
Well, I don't think anybody wants to know about the Reform Conference other than the bizarre singing intro by Dame Andrea Jenkin with her
Really?
I'm an insomniac. This is this kind of are you awake yet thing that is doing the rounds all the time with these kind of right-wing types, you know, that people are just sleepwalking into mass migration. And I saw even Elon Musk was posting again. It just popped up on my feed there just before we were about to record, just with a sort of simple statement saying, are you awake yet? But it was a peculiar spectacle, and they must think that she can sing because they closed it out, again, the clips that you can't avoid on X, with her singing God Save the King in this kind of like over-the-top, high-pitched operatic squeal. And I thought, God, if reform wasn't enough to put you off just at the best of times, this is hardly getting the ratings in. So yeah, bizarre stuff.
This is come back Theresa May with your really awkward dance. Exactly,
you're pretty dash cool there, my friend.
Well, actually, it's funny because what popped in just before we started here was something from a guy. He is a kind of Labour man, Sebastian Salek. But interestingly, he'd gone into some YouGov polls that, are suggesting reform will be the biggest party. And then just was looking at, however, at the sort of trust levels in reform. So, for example, he'd got only 24% think a Farage government would govern competently. And when you were asked to choose between Reform and Labour as a government, 43% would rather have Labour again, 37% would rather have Farage in number 10. That finally, when they were asking about the best Prime Minister between Starmer and Farage, it was 35% Starmer, 28% Farage. 56% wouldn't trust reform with the public finances. And they've actually got a graph, which is quite entertaining. I'll send it to you and you can put it in the notes, of what voters do trust reform on. And the answer is actually nothing. They actually trail Labour on even immigration. So it's one of these ones that, okay, he's a Labour guy. He's trying to kind of find some kind of, sunny bit amongst all the clouds. And yet there could be a thing about that this is, at the moment, this is a protest vote. If you're actually kind of, coming up, seeing the whites of their eyes, will people really go for it? It's just hard to say, but, that at least was an interesting set of statistics.
It is, and I think Mark Diffley was speaking recently, I think it's the Sunday Post, saying that, Scots, it's about 21% of Scots who say that the top thing that they're concerned about is immigration. And we'll certainly see a big showing for reform in the Holyrood Parliament, possibly 15 to 20 MSPs next year. But, they're not going to be forming a government at all. And I think there's quite a lot of people will rue back from them when they start to see what they're actually like. And they certainly, this idea that, you just give Farage a shout because everybody else has had to go and it couldn't be any worse than that. Well, watch this space. It could be a heck of a lot worse. And if you think the Labour Party are doing pretty well and hadn't really thought about what they wanted to do when they came into government, I think you'd see that, doubly so with an incoming reform government if we were ever unfortunate enough to get one. All the chat over the last couple of weeks is about Norway and the potential for Norway to vote in a right-wing government and lose its Labour government and end the wealth tax that they have. And of course, the results came in, was it yesterday or the day before? And the Labour Party are back. But what you have seen, I suppose, slightly similarly to here, is that the mainstream Conservative Party have been doofed and the kind of right-wingers have overtaken them. But the Labour Party in Norway still has a comfortable lead against the right wing.
Yeah, I think, since you've hit the Norway button, the Prime Minister, Jonas Gahr Støre, also has got a big sort of kind of profile within Europe, NATO. He's got a lot of experience with that sort of thing. So I think at the moment, with all the Nordics being very alert with the threat of Russia, that probably has helped them a bit over the line. So it's true. I mean, who knows? There's kind of, people can decide the Labour Party is absolutely over and back. I mean, honestly, what a week they've had. I thought I was quick off the mark because I think it was just when I was thinking on Wednesday, what would I write a column about? And then suddenly noticed this little point about Angela Rayner had popped up. And at the time, it just didn't look like it was going to kind of turn into an awful lot. But my God, it's quite astonishing. And of course, it's all moved so far. Now it's almost a week, so everyone, I mean, Angela Rayner's just gone from the radar. But I mean, I wrote a column and I did see there's quite a lot of comments. Forgive me for not being brave enough that week with everything else going in the background to see what they were, because I was saying actually it is hard to really dislike Angela Rayner because of the background she's had. And okay, I know a lot of people will go, I mean, in a way, that's almost patronizing just because she was raised in poverty on a Stockport council estate. She left school with no qualifications. She was pregnant at 16, grandmother by 37. That is a hard act to then move out of and into the kind of position she's got, for sure. There's something about her personality. I mean, again, I'm sure some people might have had a go for me picking up something that she openly said, that she took a loan out for a breast uplift after she lost a lot of weight, baby weight, in 2010. She said at the time, you can't be 30 and have a chest like an 84-year-old granny. I mean, she's outgoing, bubbly. Apparently, she had Keir Starmer's number stored in her phone as Mr. Darcy. If you can remember your characters in Bridget Jones, he's the kind of painfully sort of restrained, emotionally repressed character, really. And she, likes loud colours, likes loud clothes, apparently can operate a tow truck and a hoist. She doesn't mince her words. She didn't hesitate. She isn't focus grouped. And actually, I've seen as well a piece that was a kind of bit of a tribute to her from one of the women with the Grenfell Towers Relatives campaign, which lumbered on for, years. I think it's 2017 that horrible event happened. There was all sorts of promises that there would be something done about the remains. The block was sitting half horrible, half burnt, half collapsed, half not. And the people who lived around it just wanted, and the relatives wanted something done. And I think there was 3 relevant housing secretaries in the Tory time, came and went, promises that something would happen, nothing happened. And she came in, saw all the relatives, she took about 7 months, but she came in and said, this has got to come down. So they were so thankful that she actually stayed with them, listened and sort of made a decision. So that's the kind of, there's a lot of backdrop of course, in Scotland, I'm quite sure she's just another south of the border Labour, ex-luminary. And of course, there's the problem because, the kind of more straight up you stand, the harder you fall when you take what looks like a kind of, either an honest mistake or else really, and to me, actually, the really bit for her as well is not just making a mistake about stamp duty when they're the blinking housing secretary, for crying in a bucket, but also the idea that she did actually have 3, just like John Prescott used to be for Tony Blair. He was the bit of working class, actually rough in that he did actually swing a punch at somebody, as I recall. But, he was sort of offsetting the poshness, if you like, of Tony Blair. And Angela Rayner was doing that, for Keir Starmer. There's a bit of jet action in the background. But she's now essentially Angela 3-pads Rayner, because not only does she have her own home that she does occupy with her children, she's got the beachside flat. Gosh, can you hear me over that?
Yeah, well, I can't actually hear any of that, which is
Not
surprising.
Gosh.
After last week's banging of the doors when I was in my temporary locale, you've got all of RAF lookers going past your window, presumably.
Indeed, actually, they're really doing a big lot of flying. But anyway, apologies to everyone if you're not hearing it and me distracting you. The point being, she's got the house, near Manchester that her children are in, and it's her, primary residence for everything else. Then she bought this beachside flat in Hove, on the Sussex coast. And she also has a Grace and Favour flat in London, in Whitehall, which just while we're at it, she pays no council tax on. So she's basically got 3 homes. And I think that's the bit where it's like, right, so you're kind of like the working class hero with 3 homes, and you're the Mancunian who prefers in your spare time to be with all the kind of lush, whatever you want to characterise the Brighton set. You'd rather be there for your time off, padding around with, a large glass of wine.
Yeah. Also, many people will have, might be lucky enough to have second homes. I'm certainly not one of them, but an 800 grand flat for your kind of weekend boat hole seemed a bit over the top as well. And, lots of claims is questioning how she managed to afford all these different things.
Yeah. So, to be honest, in a way, getting away with it's a complicated situation, the constant reference to not just the working class background, but also her disabled child. It's just, that I think will possibly really annoy people because, while we're at it, if you're worried about children, you could decide that the 2-child benefit cap is as appalling as it really is, which the Labour Party won't do. You could look at disability cuts, which, still look like they're on the cards. So I'm sure if you're in that situation, the more special pleading there is for somebody, the more you begin to think, hang on a minute, this is really, is this really what you're saying? And all sorts of questions asked about, what kind of tax advisor she'd used. I'm sure if there'd been any longer while she was still in the spotlight, all those questions, like the total price of that, all of that would have been unearthed, and it just doesn't look good. So anyway, she's off ski, but I suppose the shape of her, in a sense, does dictate the shape of her successor to an extent. I mean, the deputy leader race is on now, and an awful lot of people are thinking it has to be a woman and it has to be a northerner.
Well, I mean, it's an extremely truncated process they're having. They're obviously desperate to get a new deputy leader in as quickly as possible so that there can't be a long drawn-out campaign that can cause rancour and division. They've got to get, I think it's 80 MPs to support them before they can go through, and they also require the backing of either 5% of all local parties or 3 Labour-affiliated groups, which including 2 unions. So it's a pretty hard bar to loup to get onto the ballot. And you've got Bel Rubido Ali, which is the kind of left-wing candidate, gone forward, and Bridget Phillipson, the education secretary, along with Emily Thornberry, who's just announced today.
Oh, did she announce?
She's just announced.
Yeah, and just to remind
famously,
me though,
this is I hate the SNP. I hate the SNP. Emily Thornberry.
Yes. Where's Emily Thornberry based? Can you remember?
We'll just
we're both doing quick Googles, because it just depends whether there'd been some thinking that trying to have somebody who had that north of England connection would kind of counter the accusations that basically...
No, she's married to a judge, and
slap bang London.
Her second homes, I think, are multimillionaire. And of course, the previous Conservative government, when she was opposition spokesperson, I think she might have been the opposition leader of the Commons, can't quite remember exactly, used to mockingly refer to her as Lady, whatever her husband's Lord title is, which was seemed to be very insulting, and it wasn't giving her the sort of due credit for her own place in the Commons and in society. And there was all sorts of ticking offs about that. But Emily Thornberry is certainly not, I don't think, a kind of Labour left candidate.
No. And I mean, there'd been a bit of speculation that her people were out sort of working the trade union at the TUC conference in Brighton, though, you'd imagine there'd be other candidates they might be a bit more fond of. I mean, there's a huge number of other possible lefties that might put their hats in the ring. And there seems to be a bit of speculation that actually that's being encouraged by Starmer, etc., because the hope is that they'll all knock each other out and won't manage to get over that first threshold. Which that's the first bit. By Thursday 5 p.m, you've got to have had that 80 MPs or the trade unions. Then it gets whittled down, and I think they're obviously trying to kind of control the whole thing, because it's going to be a complete. It should be a reflection on where Keir Starmer has brought things till now. And just at the same time, weirdly enough, I got a friend who is in the Labour Party, sends me a lot of stuff that he gets around. And people will not have noticed, it didn't get much coverage, but there's been a new grouping launched called Mainstream. Now, you might think, clues in the name, that wouldn't set my heather alight particularly, but it's basically a product of the Compass group within Labour. And it's kind of labelled Mainstream, the new home for Labour's radical realists. And you sort of think, I don't know, how many different flavors can you get of this party before you begin to think, let's have PR and everyone can just go their separate ways, really. But anyway, so they're in to try and launch this new hopeful and purposeful vehicle to turn the Labour Party back to the direction of hope and more progressive and plural future. So, I mean, again, it's all a bit blah in the sense of, I'm sure actually Morgan McSweeney, who is the guy from Blue Labour, essentially, who is running the Labour Party at the moment, could cut and paste all of this stuff and say, yep, that belongs to the main party as well. The only thing is, when you look at it, I mean, they're talking about Compass, almost like that, the mothership, has tried to pull Labour into the 21st century from outside, working across the party on issues like water ownership and proportional representation. And then it says, we've achieved so much. What? What? I mean, if that's your kind of calling card, matey, I think you would want to have done something about water ownership and proportional representation.
Don't even have that as a Labour policy, of course, with a fortnight ago where everybody was kicking off because they were criticising that nationalisation of public ownership of water in Scotland was a disaster, when of course it absolutely hasn't been.
Indeed.
And they were all queuing up to repeat the same rubbish. So I hardly think that's filtered through as even a kind of wider Labour Party, parliamentary party platform.
So it does sort of make you wonder. And yet again, the blurb about the launch of this group is Labour is so much more than the small right-wing clique that currently runs it. So, okay, that is sort of nailing your colours somewhat to the mast. And actually, when you then look at the list of signatories, they've got a fair old number. They've got Andy Burnham, Claire Short, John Cruddas, Clive Lewis, Rachel Maskell, Alf Dubbs, and Paul Sweeney from Scotland. So it's still sort of difficult to say. I mean, I had a right old Google around with it. What they're not planning to operate. They're not planning, by the sound of it, to stand candidates. None of those names I've mentioned are, and there's more, are kind of, have put themselves forward for the deputy leadership, for example. And they're trying to sort of influence. And you think, oh, God, I mean, knock yourselves out if you've really got the energy for this now after the length of time. Do you think of some of those names? They've been in politics for 20, 30 years of this, watching the slow rightward drift of Labour. Trying to influence that, you're going to have to get really, really well organised. Who knows? It might be on the cards, but at the moment, anyway, mainstream, they're lurking about. It would be interesting because if they don't have essentially a candidate for the deputy leadership, and maybe that's another reason this has all been done so quickly, they're sort of missing a trick.
Definitely. I mean, that is the one prize to influence. And we're possibly going to see someone like Bridget Phillipson, the current English Education Secretary, and Sir Starmer ally, shoehorned in there to keep things secure at the top. Because if this was a longer contest, I think you could see a real unpicking of all the various Labour missteps that we've been talking about over the last 12 months. Coming home to roost, and some real challenges for Starmer's leadership. We've already had kind of rumours of that for a while now, that he won't necessarily go the full course and last the entire term of the government. So these things are a point of weakness. And for all Angela Rayner's keeping it real, I suppose she also was able to contain some of the internal pressure in the Labour Party, and she was the seen as the spokesperson, trying to keep the government away from some of the more difficult right-wing things and bringing them back. She was at the heart of government. With her gone, there's a possibility of an even worse trajectory in terms of their policy outcome, and that this contest could really open up some of the divisions that are there in the Labour Party. Indeed, and the Employment Rights Bill, which was her thing, this is the big worry, is that will get chucked because the Labour leadership is very open to the point of view of employers. And of course,
if you're listening to, to anything at the moment, it's all about growth, 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 and jobs, jobs, jobs. And let's just say the word, lest we be accused of ignoring it. The contract for shipyards on the Clyde for warships is a thing. So all of that is the kind of backdrop, is the kind of emphasis on work leaning the way of employers. And then you've got the Employment Rights Bill, which the employers side are really hacked off about. So there's a lot of worry that this will get watered down, or what seems more likely is that there will just be a long hold put on its implementation if it passes. And that's the kind of stuff that, could be on the cards. When you look at things as well, like the kind of shuffle did look weird, as many people said, if these were the best people for the jobs, why have they just been in different positions if these are the top people for everything from here on in? There's particularly Shabana Mahmood, who's moving to the Home Secretary position. There's a lot of speculation that your man behind the blue Labour kind of thing, Morgan McSweeney, is basically, hands all over this sort of move, because she has talked about her natural affinity for faith, flag and family. And we will be talking about
the good old flags.
The good old flag, and Keir Starmer's weird need to be sort of hovering beneath the
I've got one at home,
times.
He keeps saying.
I mean,
and even they had what was it? The former Home Secretary Yvette Cooper was on the other night.
Yeah, she ended up having to say she got one in the corner. I mean, it's ridiculous. But anyway, just to finish the thing about Shabana Mahmood, because I think people might not know a lot about her. Just for your information, she was born in Birmingham. Her father was a civil engineer. He was chair of the local Labour Party. She went to Oxford University, and yet she is already getting racist stuff coming her way. She's a Pakistani Muslim. And the New Statesman's got a very interesting piece about the Americanization of the British right, and observing that all sorts of traditional markers of sort of British society, manners, service, locality, are being displaced because racial identity is becoming a test of belonging and loyalty. And you can't change your racial identity. So they're saying that the right-wing assumption is that her background renders her inherently incapable of putting Britain first. And this is quite extraordinary because, I mean, she is blue Labour. And these are the guys who just go to sleep, clutching the Union Jack. So it's a kind of weird and horrible situation where she will be bound to get a lot of racist attack from the same right that she is essentially appealing to in her faith, flag and family outlook. So God almighty, this is a yuck situation. I wish these guys well, because I think they're going to have the most horrible 3 or 4 years ahead of themselves. But anyway, clutching the flag, there's one for you, my dear.
Oh, God, yes. Well, I mean, Yvette Cooper's apparently got Union flag bunting up on the summer house in the garden at the minute. And she's got George's flag somewhere else, and goodness knows. But we have seen recently a kind of a slight attempt to co-opt the Saltire and use of these right-wing protests as part of the wider UK, I think it's called Raise the Colours campaign that there was in England, encouraging people to fly their national flags in opposition to immigration and asylum. I can't really see that being an overall success here, because whilst the Cross of St. George, unfortunately, has had a long connection with English right-wing nationalism, the Saltire in Scotland has a completely opposite connotation. It's also much more readily flown and adopted, and of course, seen all over the place during the referendum and subsequently, and cherished very much by independent supporters who take an entirely different outlook on immigration matters to what these campaigners want to push forward with. And there was a rally, was that yesterday or certainly over the weekend, completely drowned out. I think there was about 75 odd racist campaigners came to protest at Holyrood as part of this Enough is Enough campaign, were met with, hundreds of people from the STUC and Stand Up to Racism, unions, independent supporters.
And all under one banner.
So, the numbers don't stack up, but we have seen the use of the flag in Maryhill that we talked about the other week, and in Falkirk and bits and bobs, but I don't see the long-term, penetration of that having.
Although, it was weird though, because I'm trying to remember what of the many motorways I was on going and coming to Kirkcudbright. There was one where around Ayrshire where there was a Saltire on every bridge across the motorway facing both ways. I thought that's quite kind of careful on the right side of the carriageway for each one. Yep. So I thought clever placement, and I thought the amount of that suggests to me it's people that have done this a bit, and that suggests essentially it's our guys, the Yes campaign. But for the first time, it leaves you with a little question mark as to whether it means something else now. I'm sure this period will pass, and the claiming of it in marches like the All Under One Banner and whatever, and for the most of the public, they will simply, that automatic association is there, a bit like the word yes is connected to the campaign for independence, and it would be hard for anybody to try and argue their way around it now. And yet it just is a horrible thing where, it's a free world, right? So, whatever position you are, if you live here for 3 months, you are seen as a citizen able to vote in a Scottish election. So you are able to do with the Saltire essentially what you want. And yet it is. But I wondered, because you've got sort of a background with the Saltire, haven't you?
Well, I'm a trustee of the flag trust at Athelstanford, which is cited as the birthplace of the flag. This is where Walter Bower, the medieval chronicler, suggests that the supposed battle that everyone, I think, has heard of in folklore, this idea of the Saltire appearing in the sky, he connects it specifically with the Battle of Athelstanford in 832 AD. I can't speak for the charity on the podcast, but the Flag Trust promotes the Saltire as a welcoming symbol for all Scots, whether they're Scots by birth, by choice, or through their family roots. And people should certainly check out saltire.scot for more information about the museum and the Saltire Memorial, which is actually coming up to its 60th anniversary in November on St Andrew's Day. But it's interesting, the unionist, the more kind of Bammiest side of the unionist argument would say that the colour of the Saltire has been watered down, and that the Saltire that you would have seen on the bridges for indie campaigns is what do they call it? A separatist Saltire, because it's a light blue rather than the dark navy blue. Mm-hmm. Which is a complete load of rubbish, of course. The proper colour of the Saltire was adopted well before the SNP came into power in 2007. It was all about making sure that flag manufacturers actually made the flag in the proper colour that it's supposed to be, which is a sky blue, because of course it's a white cross against a blue sky, rather than the dark navy blue that's in the Union flag. And the only reason that dark blue is in the Union flag is because the biggest users of flags was the Navy, and in the 18th century they darkened it down to dark navy blue so that it would last longer. It didn't get UV damaged when it was out on use in ships. Cool. So I suppose flags are contentious, but we do not want to be seeing the Saltire associated with this type of racist campaigning, and it's certainly not something that ever was a part of the independence referendum. And, we don't have that sort of blood and soil nationalism. And in many ways, it seemed that this desire to co-opt the Saltire was a bit of an attempt to say, the people in Scotland are just as bad. And, this is a whole UK thing. And to kind of co-opt our symbols in the same way as the St George's Cross has been co-opted.
Yeah. And just coming back to himself, this thing of Starmer, sort of basically, I can't even remember what it was, but just the awkwardness of this guy having to say, yes, I have a flag practically, in every room. There's a flag, Union flag and the whatever. And yep, all that stuff. It reminded me so much of the point where Gordon Brown was told to smile. It's like a leader in trouble who is somebody's focus grouped it up and said, about Gordon, you just come over a bit kind of gloomy and overbearing and something like that, so just smile a bit. And there was that awful moment, it's still there in every interview with him, where he suddenly remembers he has to smile and this rictus grin suddenly appears that doesn't reach his eyes. So it's worse than if he had embraced, look, he's a gloomy guy, get with it, that's just the size of it, this is who I am. Like, to an extent, Jeremy Corbyn with the donkey jacket. He's that kind of guy, just, you can't colour him beautiful, that's just the way he is. Now we've got Starmer, who, just from his attire and his outlook and his past and everything, it's the reason that he feels he has to be hanging on to the Union flag everywhere is because it just isn't him. It doesn't, nothing in his past suggests that. But all the polling when Jeremy Corbyn lost that election, all the polling suggested that the North of England voter in particular felt there was a lack of loyalty to the country from Corbyn. And ever since then, the new Labour, the Starmer Labour, Blue Labour, let's say, has been absolutely intent on assuring people that it's the country first, it's defence contracts, it's sleeping in the Union Jack, it's everything about loyalty. And, this kind of patter, I can imagine it may, I don't know if it works for anybody. I mean, it just makes my teeth go on edge because it's so unspontaneous and so, well, it's obviously so right wing as well. But they must be in such danger of losing the people that are sitting, especially when you've got kind of other places to go, like the Green Party in England. I mean, the new guy, Zach Polanski, totally trashed the two MPs that were standing. He's quite some guy, actually. I mean, he's had a very checkered history, as people will probably have picked up from some of the coverage of that. He's actually in the London Assembly, so he's not an MP, which is a bit of a first, probably. He was born in Salford, and he jokes not to a tool maker, but a purveyor of tools at a DIY store. So he worked his mother works as a TV makeup artist. He came out as gay at 15. He was being bullied. He left school. He went on to study drama. He became an actor. He ended up in the community company called Theatre of the Oppressed. Then he joined the Lib Dems, really, and then backed the Remain cause. Then he ran into Extinction Rebellion, and then he met the Green leader, Natalie Bennett, and decided he'd found his political home. Now, you'd look at all of that and you'd think, right, I think that there's an awful lot of wobbly points in that background. And yet, it's a different kind of approach to it. He's very strong on the thing about acting. He says, acting is not lying. Acting is about authentic communication. God, he could have a job with Blue Labour soon if he just keeps that up. His partner's also a palliative care worker, so he knows what's happening on the sharp end. He's openly accusing Israel of genocide in Gaza, called for Thames Water to be publicly owned, higher taxes on inheritance, all that kind of stuff. So, and he's up and at it, so he's going to get more coverage for the Greens south of the border. And of course, we still haven't even heard about your party, the Corbyn Zara Sultana vehicle, and what that will offer. So if I was a sort of middle of the roady kind of Labour person watching this covering yourself on the Union flag and patter from Starmer, I would really start to wonder, about where I was going. And in fact, the more general situation for Starmer, his approval ratings are -41. And that is a sharper decline in the year and a bit since they came in than any recent Prime Minister. And there was an interesting bit actually even in the Sunday Times, which is really, far from a radical rag, observing that the electorate, and this would be the British electorate, right, has voted for radical change in 4 elections: Brexit in 2016, Corbyn in 2017, Boris Johnson 2019 and Starmer. Yet every time the public has been left feeling change hasn't followed. And that's being read by the guy who does the polling, More in Common, Luke Trill, that's the polling company. They're observing that 7 in 10 people, that's a British sample, 7 in 10 believe the Labour government is a continuation of the last Tory government. So that, despite those statistics earlier, about people when they're really taken to the brink going, I don't know. But I mean, if that's true, and I think it's got to be where the whole electorate's at. Everybody is saying this is not as good as this country can be. Now, north of the border, I think we're thinking, look, you guys who've got sort of strange sentimental or emotional attachments to the days of glory and kind of a status quo, which we have kind of abandoned quite a long time ago. You guys can sort yourselves out. We'll just do our country. We'll do what we can do. But even south of the border, these guys are like so unhappy with nobody creating any kind of real change. And that is the chance of de-risking Nigel Farage, because people are thinking we want change of some sort, and nobody's going to do it.
Also, that lack of authenticity is a real problem for the Labour Party in Scotland, because the next year's Scottish elections, if Starmer moves more rightward and continues under Sabina Mahmood to push things like the European Court of Human Rights and, making more stringent changes to visa rules, that potentially push people in Scotland to more leftward leaning parties like the SNP or possibly Jeremy Corbyn. I don't think they're going to get their act together in any kind of sense for 2026. And the people on the right, just as people used to vote Conservative in Scotland if they were unionists because they knew they were properly unionists in the way that the Labour Party didn't seem to be when Ruth Davidson was in her ascendancy. It's not very credible. You'd be better off voting for the real thing and going to reform. So you can see the Labour vote in Scotland hiving off in two different directions, which is really not what you want to do.
But I mean, that was one point that I put to Henry McLeish at that event in Kirkcudbright, when I'd said to him, if it's the case that, I mean, there's various polls projecting the next Westminster elections, and all of them suggest that Reform would be the largest party, with the caveats expressed earlier, over the Peace. But one suggests there would be no Reform MPs in Scotland, and the other suggests there would be 3. So I'd said to Henry, if we get to a situation like that, essentially repeating the complete cavernous gap between English voting and Scottish voting that happened with the Brexit referendum, and indeed every blasted general election, because after all, we're not voting Tory and we keep getting them. But if we get that level of dissent really expressed in Scotland, so we potentially don't even have a single MP from the governing party, which repeats where we were with the Tories, I think, up till 1997, are you still going to say it's okay, but we're better off within the union? And there was a long pause, I've got to say. And then he said, it's not going to happen, because basically Reform will just take the Tory vote in Scotland. The Tories will completely collapse and Tories will vote Reform. And it won't take anything from Labour, and Labour might still do quite well. Who knows? But I mean, just in the midst of all this, we've forgotten poor old Ian Murray, which seems to be his fate.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the big news that truffle had been unearthed on the Isle of Bute as part of this new plan to cultivate truffles.
No, just don't allow yourself to go on a Bute truffle distraction. Though
you're going from a big fungus in Bute to a wee doogie.
No, we're not going to Dougie directly. Let's just have for a second about Ian Murray, because actually I thought it was you and I had a wee conversation about Ian Murray, because had you not met him and thought
Ian Murray obviously was Edinburgh MP, so I've met him loads of times. He's always quite a sort of jovial chap, very pleasant, always remembers who you are, was great with any students or anything that we brought down. And I noticed, I think it was the Daily Record quoting a Labour MP saying that Douglas is a wee P **K who's been agitating for this job for over a year, and if I had £1 for everyone who liked Douglas, I'd have 50p. So I think there was shock across the ranks, basically, that Ian Murray had been put out, the Labour's sole survivor in 2015, had held the fort for as long as, difficulties under Corbyn, and then now appointed as Secretary of State for Scotland, which is, of course, a fairly meaningless role, and now boofed out unceremoniously.
And just on the background of Ian Murray, though, I seem to remember you saying that, did he not come from Sight Hill or whatever? I mean, he went to the WEC, Wester Hales Education Centre, and was a kind of ordinary and always so a working class guy from a housing estate.
Yeah.
Right. Which is, again, because I can remember it because I didn't know that necessarily about that backstory. And a lot of people might think, I don't care, actually. But still, that probably is part of that real deal thing, if you like, a bit that also, Angela Rayner carried. But it's watching this guy. I mean, he did literally sacrifice his lifelong principles over nuclear weapons to toe the line for Keir Starmer. And I mean, it's extraordinary. I'm sure a lot of people will go, and why are we even worried about this guy?
I'm sure a lot of people listening to this will remember him in his Union Jack suit, and I'll have absolutely no time for him whatsoever.
Exactly.
Quite understandably so.
All of that, right. But you're just looking at the level of, if you're within the Labour Party, he was loyal to a fault to Starmer, basically, and held the line through all the awful mistakes that Starmer has made. And then actually I noticed from one thing, he's just had a new bairn as well, and then got booted out of office by a phone call, a phone call to him clearly when he was in Edinburgh Airport, I think, in a lounge somewhere, and somebody snapped a wee photo of him sitting on his laptop with his hand, head in his hands, which must have been the moment that it happened. I think somebody else pointing out that if anybody was suggesting that this was kind of something in the planning, the idea that it was, especially when it happened, I think on Friday, when all the MPs were in their constituencies, so all of it had to be done over the phone. There's no way anybody would have planned a reorganisation like this. It's just, So anyway, now he's got 2 jobs, which actually almost just accentuates how much of a booby prize these things are. If you've been given one new job in either culture or what's the other one, I've suddenly forgotten, science, you could manage to fluff it up a little bit, even though I don't think it's in the cabinet. So anyway, that's what you get for doing the hard miles for Labour in Scotland. You get dumped at the drop of a hat for someone who is, who is Douglas Alexander. And I mean, okay, I'm sure that to a certain ear, he sounds more bullish, more authoritative, all the rest of it. I've got to say, I can only handle him saying Scotland so many times, shrieking Scotland at the radio. But just generally, the cockiness of it is just maddening. And it's hard to know if that's just me or independent supporters, in which case he probably won't care. I mean, if he's actually reaching somebody, but there's a sort of smugness about him that is just insufferable. So anyway, there we are.
I mean, I think you're right, though. I mean, if you're going to have a pretend crap job just to give you some kind of ministerial salary, you go from being a Secretary of State and Secretary of State for Scotland, which still has a bit of cachet. You've got Dover House and you can buzz up to Edinburgh and what have you and lord it about the place, to being given not one crap job, but 2 that you have to somehow split yourself between. I'm a Culture Today or am I something else? Was really a massive insult, and only seems to have come about because of this huge internal backlash by his Scottish Labour colleagues. He is apparently, Douglas Alexander, closer to Anna Sarwar in a way that Ian Murray wasn't, but I hardly think this is going to bring people flocking back to the Labour Party. And Douglas was in charge of the 2015 general election campaign, and I think is now co-chair of the Labour Party in Scotland.
Or the last one?
The 2015.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, that's it. My previous successes include complete
decimating
wipeout.
Everything, yeah. Although will he not be pointing to, all the by-elections? You never end up hearing about him and Jackie Bailey basically coming from nowhere to sort of confound everybody. And obviously everybody will realise it's fine to do that in a by-election when you can throw everything at it. But when you've got, is it still 73 seats on the go in in fact, in a Holyrood election, it's 129, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's going to be a tough one to try to put that level of engagement in, particularly if you've hacked off, your foot soldiers. And who knows how many of them campaigners feel really annoyed over the Ian Murray thing, or will feel that placated because he's got some wee booby prize. Who knows?
Who knows? But I mean, I think a lot of, if you were in the Labour Party, I can only speculate, but I'd imagine there's still this constant feeling of, second best, things just happen to us and they're completely out of our control. And that their electoral fortunes will be very much bound up in whatever's happening with the UK Labour Party. And we've got the budget being delayed until the end of November, which is hardly a kind of confidence ringing statement that the October autumn budget is now being held at the beginning of November, which will of course cause the Scottish Government headaches because it needs to wait until the UK government's published and then analyse it for all its tricks and blind alleys before they can publish their own spending. So that's going to push the Scottish budget into January.
Yeah. And of course, there's a lot of speculation. Darren Jones is being lined up to be the next Chancellor should everything go pear-shaped for Rachel Reeves. It's all, there's no aspect of what's going on in which Scotland quite obviously figures or matters at all. And I don't know how often people need to keep getting that. Labour will stand or fall in their eyes in Westminster on small boats versus Nigel Farage, and how much they managed to kind of distract from an economic situation that nobody has really tackled now for decades, actually. How much they can distract from that by kind of clinging to the Union Jack and trying to distract people onto gains of a small nature. Because, how excited could anybody get by that reshuffle? Is anyone excited that Yvette Cooper is now in the Foreign Office? Or what about... I think
only civil servants in the Foreign Office will be absolutely delighted to have got rid of David Lammy. But, David Lammy is Deputy Prime Minister. It's hardly reaching the parts that other beers don't.
No. And then there's Pat McFadden, who is a Scot. But the radical idea of the whole thing seems to have been to take skills out of education and attach it to a new super Department of Work and Pensions and Skills, something run by Pat McFadden. Wow. I'm not being sarcastic, Pat, but wow. This reminds me of, sorry, because this is about as naff as my Gran Canaria hat, I'm warning you, Fraser, but, Dirty Dancing, Patrick Swayze. There is a moment at the end where he's suggesting a bit of something different for the final dance. And of course, everyone's thinking, yeah, a bit of a sort of hip thrusting, Dirty Dancing thing. And the son of the owner of the place that they're staying in suggests a tiny variation on the theme. And there's just that look on the face, which is, right, you think that's different? Well, that springs to mind very strongly with this, because really, this is the Katanga, or whatever it is. This is just nothing different to anybody outside their own narrow group. Anyway, God damn it, enough of them.
Definitely. We should just say very briefly before we move on from all of the previous stuff. We said the Norway warships, of course, an investment by the Royal Norwegian Defence Forces into BAE Systems in Glasgow, but of course it's badged up as a Union flag. We won it for Scotland type thing, and I'm sure our listeners would want us to have a very briefest mention of that before we moved on.
Indeed.
Now, you're off next week, which we finally got our heads together properly on, because you're off to Finland, and I believe there's some intriguing news about the Highland Wind.
Yes, the film about the Highland wind farms is now complete, so it'll be going out, I think, next week. You're in charge of all the sending, Fraser, but to subscribers, we'll get a look at that, and then it will go up onto YouTube for Aberdeen. And I think it's probably pretty timely. There's an awful lot of people now weighing in, and in fact, I've got to say, having sent it to a lot of the folk who were interviewees in that film, and many of them actually independents and SNP supporters. The only thing that I'm getting back from people that they didn't feel was in there hard enough was how disappointed they are in the Scottish Government. Because, planning is a Scottish Government function, and they hoped, they believed, that they didn't think much of Westminster. They weren't holding their breath for that. But they had expected the Scottish Government to come cantering to the rescue. The Scottish Government is saying they're bound by the Electricity Act. I mean, to be honest, and this question strangely did come up in the Henry McLeish thing at Kirkcudbright as well. If we're looking at a situation where reform are going to swing in potentially, and you've got to ask questions about how intact devolution is likely to look should they become part of the next government, the way to defend devolution is to use it, to push it, to expand it, not to be sitting terrified like a bunny in the headlights within, a large margin of safety. But I mean, deciding that you're going to intervene and not, for example, there's one particular wind farm in it. We speak to the people connected who have managed to get a judicial review. This wind farm was rejected by Highland Council. It was rejected by the Scottish Government reporter, and a Scottish Government minister overturned that. So it's going ahead. That hurts, that group of people a lot more actually than the initial targets being set up from Ed Miliband, who I hear was also up for having a reshuffle but survived. So that's the only thing that people feel we didn't kind of hit hard enough in it. So you can have a look and see what you think. It'll be coming soon.
Grant, so I think the NORA conference extra will go out to everybody next
and that's
week.
No one will remember what that was. That was basically a conference that started away ages ago, which was all the North Atlantic small states were gathered for the first time in Scotland. And I spoke to a bunch of young people actually who are sort of facing, if anybody thinks there's problems with remoteness in Scotland, try being in the Faroes or the very remote north of Norway. So these guys are quite inspiring actually. And that's the podcast that will be going out next week when I am up to meet Oxters in Helsinki in Finland.
Brilliant. Well, that'll go out next week. I'll put the link to the Highland Win on the email that goes out this week to subscribers, and they can choose whether to watch it now or to save it till next week. But they'll get the link this week, and then the Highland Wind will go out to everybody on YouTube in the coming weeks. And I'm sure we wish you all the very best in Finland for some cracking footage there, and we look forward to seeing the Finland film when it comes out shortly. And on that note, folks, we'll see you not next week, but the week after.